Hello, welcome to the No Show. My name's Andrea Edwards.
My name is Joe Augustine, and sitting in for Tim, I'm going to let her introduce herself because I'll mispronounce her name. Sam. Hey, Sam.
Sam Gayfer. Good.
It's good to have you back, Sam.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So Sam's going to be sitting in for the next 2 weeks because Tim's decided to go on a bit of a jolly to Australia, which, well overdue, catching up with his family. So.
Well, and he doesn't trust his mom to have good Wi-Fi. I mean, what kind of son does that, right?
Yeah, well, it is Australia.
Well, this is the No Show, the show that tries to celebrate knowing stuff and having an opinion and thinking about things, critical thinking. So it's not always about just looking for the things that you already know. It's about opinions you might not have already. And we always try to bring on, well, not just one guest on this occasion, but more guests so that we can have an interesting and diverse conversation. So the man that I'm about to introduce, I can only say has, and he'll explain this in a moment as well, has a lot of cocks around the house. Please welcome Denys Van Rooyen. I think I've said it right.
Oh, no, Joe, absolutely. Thank you so much. You're spot on. No, good practice and a lot of cocks around the house. Yeah. No, there's a couple of chickens about and a couple of dogs. One has to take care.
Right. And snakes. You've got a collection of them too, right?
Yeah, no, I have to keep the snakes about. No, it's just fun. It's a really interesting hobby, and I like the detail. I like the detail.
For a quick one, can you do an introduction? Well, how would someone what does someone need to know who you are ahead of time?
Yeah, no. So yesterday you guys asked me to write a bio, and I phoned up and someone and I said, look, man, how do I write a bio about myself? Basically, it's like this. I've been an expat out of South Africa for maybe about 20 years, maybe a little bit more by now. I started in retail and subsequently, like I said in the bio, I saw the light at the end of the tunnel and thank God it wasn't a train. And I started sailing boats. People would hire me to sail their boats to tropical paradise islands. And I'm fortunate enough now to live on a tropical paradise island. So, yeah, that's basically me, man. It's not really a complicated or involved thing. It's all about easy living.
So we've got our first boat captain.
Yeah, sure.
But also, you've been watching the show for a few weeks, and you're someone who's really engaged with what's going on in the world. So we're really happy to have you here.
Oh, thank you very much. I like interesting stuff, man, and I like to follow what's going on. Like I said, it's the details, and the details is what fascinates me. Why? Wow. Why do you do that? How do you do that? What's your thought process behind it? That's what interests me.
It's very IB, Dennis.
Yeah, well, you're not the first one to say that. I mean, to quote a couple of mates of mine, they like to say I'm very militant. I like to think about it more of I've got very fixed boundaries, very fixed opinions, but I'm open to everybody else's. It's not a judgment.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, you've never felt close-minded to me.
No, well, I try to be.
Never. Sort of things I like about you, you do listen, but you also have interesting takes as well, because all four of us have grown up in very, very different ways with different influences, different backgrounds. I think that's what I find fascinating about these conversations, including the roosters in the background.
Oh, can you hear them? Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'll have to be more vigilant on this. I'll take one up because I can't hear them with this mic. Oh God,
they're very vocal.
He's got to go outside and go like, "I'm going to cook one of you."
It won't be the first time. It won't be the first time.
They appear to be terrible timekeepers because it's nowhere near the crack of dawn right now.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not. Normally it starts at about 3, and funny enough, at about 4-ish in the afternoon, it goes off. But let me close this door. Give me a moment.
All right.
I actually wonder whether it's part of the seaman's way where you're kind of open to hearing other people's conversations, other points of view, because you're literally stuck in a location together. There's no getting away. You sort of have to have a little bit of flexibility in terms of, I guess, appreciating other points of view.
Otherwise, you end up in like a Cape Fear situation.
Sorry, I missed all the conversation. All I'm thinking is chickens and Cape Fear. Yeah, no, it's scary as hell.
No, I'm just wondering whether or not it's common amongst seafarers to be maybe more accepting of different kinds of people, because you're always stuck in the same situation anyway. So you have to be a bit more accommodating to someone who's not like yourself, maybe?
Well, yes, Joe, that's actually a very good statement to make, man. It's kind of a dichotomy of sorts, because you are in the situation because you put yourself there, and in order to be there, you have to be accepting of whatever else is going on. You know what I mean? You can't stand fast to your traditions and your culture and your opinions and your mindset, and then expect everybody else to conform to it. So think about it on an old pirate ship. It's a very good example. On an old pirate ship, you have 40 people, different cultures, different nationalities. They come from all over the world. But regardless of any of that, you know, this guy believes in Muhammad, this guy believes in Jesus, this guy believes in his forefathers. I mean, you can go into details that'll blow you away. But yet everybody is able to come together and live their lives and get onto the boat and make sure the boat gets to the destination and pillage and do whatever they do to make success of what they do. So this is what I mean by the dichotomy. Yes, in order to be in that situation and achieve success, you have to be open and you have to change your mindset. But in order to get there, you have to let go of what you are used to and what you are, you know what I mean, have been taught for the sake of this discussion.
I don't think many people have thought about the idea of the boardroom in a pirate ship, but that quite describes it well, I think.
Well, look, I've been in both, man. The boardroom and the pirate ship is not the same thing. I'd much rather be in a pirate ship.
But I'm sure Sam has been involved in many, many marketing campaigns where the boat is the central and teamwork is the central sort of imagery that's used, you know, for teamwork messages, leadership messages, all that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
The classic being, we are not all in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm.
Yes, that's another one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
We used it a lot in COVID because you have so many different people with different impacts, and everybody is in the storm that is COVID. But you know, someone's on a yacht and someone's in a rowboat. So it's trying to keep all that in mind whenever we talk about it. Whenever you look at vaccine rollouts, whenever you look at people's perspectives, is, you know, what kind of boat are they in?
Yeah. Walk a mile in the shoes, man.
Yeah. All right, Joe.
So the format. Well, I was going to say that and again, I apologize. I've only been running on 3 hours of sleep, so some words are not arriving as I ask for them. No, I was just saying that I didn't introduce Samantha, and I guess in what she's been saying, you probably got the idea, because someone who's joining us for the first time would not have the background that she has. Lots of experience in corporate communications, as she was alluding to in her comment just a moment ago. All right, so the format is about talking about the news, talking about things that are in the news, and of course you get the commentary of, well, on this occasion, very diverse, I think a very diverse background, and yet we're all in the same storm. So Andrea, let's just hear about the storm.
All right, but before that, we have to wish you a happy birthday this week, Joe.
Oh, well, thank you.
Celebrate.
Oh, happy birthday, Joe. Best wishes, mate.
Happy birthday.
Thank you very much. I've been 25 now for way too long.
Yeah. You don't want to be 25. You at 25 isn't as good as Joe at 53, right?
No.
And I think if we cherry pick, you all know the different things you choose from different parts of your life, right? I like to be as experienced as I am right now. I like to have the patience of my dad, who was much older. But I'd love to have the physical stamina of the 25-year-old.
Yeah. That's a good point. All right. So let's get into the news that struck a chord this week. And I think one of the good news story that really stood out for me was they have found Shackleton's lost ship in Antarctica. Isn't that a cool story? Did you guys have a look at it?
Yeah.
I mean, the photography is amazing, and it hasn't broken down. It's really well preserved. It's
like it was cryogenically frozen.
Yeah. And it can't be
perfect time for the nicest appearance on the show.
Exactly.
No. When the email went around and I saw Shackles was the first guy. No, it's exciting times, man. Look, the basic issue is that this guy went down to go and see if he can find the South Pole. His ship got stuck in ice, and just in the beginning of the winter, and as the winter progressed, his ship got crushed up, and these guys had to escape. And this was back in the day when warm clothes was fur, and you were eating blubber, seal fat, whale fat, in order to get enough calories in order just to stay warm. So the fact that they found their ship and, you know, identified it as the Endurance and all that is an amazing thing. It's a great thing for history. But the Achilles heel is this: because it's protected under the Arctic Conservancy law, they can't touch a single thing on that boat. They can take as many photos as they want, but they cannot touch a single thing. So that's a bit of a downside. You know, I hope that they get to a point where they're able to explore it, to enrich our knowledge and enrich our history, which would be nice. But nevertheless, it's a good find, man. It's really exciting. I like stuff like that.
Yeah, but from just to add the environment layer onto this, so basically the only reason they've been able to find it because it was in such an inhospitable part of the Antarctic. Sorry, the past month has seen the lowest extent of Antarctic ice ever recorded during the satellite era, which basically goes back to the 1970s, and that's why the conditions were unexpectedly favourable. So, if the sea ice continues to go, you know, we might be able to get more.
Yeah, no, correct. I mean, normally that area is covered under sheet ice. You know, it's a couple of I don't know, let's call it a couple of meters of thick, so 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 meters thick, and the wreck was found in 3 kilometers of water. Yeah. I mean, let's not forget that it was 3 kilometers down. You know, basically intact, no woodworm infestation, very little oxygen down there, so nothing really rots. Lots of filter feeders on top of the wreck, lots of sea life. Really cool thing, man. It's this amazing thing, but unfortunately, that's about as much as I think they'll do. You know, it's not going to be the Titanic where some famous director takes his boat down and just takes it to pieces and everybody's happy. This is going to be one of those things.
Can they get in and document it though? Like, are they actually able to go into the hull and actually at least photograph, or do they literally cannot touch it?
Well, Sam, that's a really good question. You know, I'm sure the technology exists to make drones small enough, 3 kilometers down, attached by cable, in order to swim through the holes and the portholes and all that to see what's going on. But whether they're able to take samples of wood or, you know, remove anything from the wreck, as far as I understand it, really, no, not really. So, you know, as the broad term states, you're not allowed to disturb it. So that's that. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, look, remember you talking to Ovi. I'm but a novice in this. Yeah, sure. But as I interpret it, no, it's going to be a very difficult task. But it's cool they found it nonetheless.
Yeah. Cool.
Very cool.
All right. Jay's here. I don't think that a pirate ship might one day be a good analogy for a functional world. Yeah, I like that. Joe, I'm going to ask you to keep an eye on the comments so that we can show them as we go through. All right. So let's get stuck into the meat of the news this week. And the first thing that I really want to ask everybody is how you're feeling about what's going on in the world.
Cool.
Scared.
Yeah, man. Yeah. When was I asked Andrea earlier, when was the last time you guys put fuel in your cars or in your motorcycles or whatever you ride?
Just in the last week. I mean, I've noticed it going up over the last year as well, like, you know, sort of 30% higher. And, you know, for me, that's you know, that's not an issue, but for a lot of people, that's a massive issue. So, yeah, I mean, the impact globally and the rollout, which is, you know, the first focus I want to start on. But yeah, I've been getting a lot of people reaching out to me, just really struggling and sitting in a lot of terror and fear for the future. It's a hard time, right?
Yeah.
No, it's a tough one.
I think, you know, you did the podcast the other day about how you get through these times and, you know, the piece where you talked about coming home to Steve and saying, you know, do we need to pack bags and go? I mean, we're having the same conversation. I said to Jay, I'm like, no, we need to go buy a farm in Canada. Like, we need to start learning how to grow some food and buy something somewhere where it's not going to flood. And we've kind of joked about it in the past, and it's not so much a joke anymore. You know, it's like, my mom's a real estate agent. My mom, find us a farm. You know? And that's, you know, you kind of jest, but it's scary that is really where you're at.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
Yeah. I mean, do we need to make sure we've got some cash in the safe if we have to move at a moment's notice? You know, because, I mean, we don't know what can happen. And I think that's a very unsettling thing for a lot of people. And I also know a lot of people just aren't even thinking about it. They don't even want to confront it, you know, which in some ways is even harder because it's not like you can ignore it. The truth is there. So yeah, it's pretty uncertain times. But the one thing, in that podcast I was saying, we can't sit in the fear of what potentially could happen in the future, because it's just crippling to sit in that place, right?
I mean, think about it like this. So you are a nationality of whatever passport you hold, Australia, Hong Kong, or Canada, South Africa for this matter. Sorry, Joe, I might be wrong with Hong Kong, but I'm just taking a swing here.
I'll take Malaysian. Yeah, Malaysian.
Malaysian, all right.
Malaysia.
So you are now expats in a different country, and now things turn a bit difficult. You get sanctions. It gets a little bit more expensive to live where you live. What makes you think that you're going to have an easier life returning to the country of origin? You know what I mean? It creates that false sense of safety, maybe.
For us, it's literally geographical. Like, if you look at the maps, Canada stands to be one of the last places on the planet that is inhabitable. So, just grateful that my kids have that passport, that we have that passport, that we have a path back there. But it doesn't, you just have to think about, we literally have this summer, like, okay, do we get a big plot of land and build like a bunch of cabins on it, and then, save spaces for the people who we, know are going to need to relocate. We have beautiful friends who are South African. We have amazing friends from Africa. Like, they're not going to be able to go home. So, do we try to build something where, our version of an ark? It's crazy to be having those thoughts.
Yeah.
I just had a picture of Singapore-styled, HDB flats as a kind of way to get away in country Canada.
No, but if you look at the future maps based on it being too hot to live or rising oceans, that is the sort of thing where we're going to have to be clustered in smaller spaces, and those obviously going to be high-rise sort of buildings to get as many people as possible. And part of the adaptation is actually preparing for that. And, the refugee crisis, 2 million refugees have left Ukraine this week. And one of my thoughts is, well, this is an opportunity to start building the refugee infrastructure that is going to be needed in the future, rather than continually not being prepared for it, because it's coming, right? More than half the world's population is living in areas that are at great risk of survival. So we've got to start getting prepared. And I know it's a scary thing to think about, but this, you guys know me, I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time, but we are now in a changed world, and we're not going back to what we left behind. We're just not. And I think if you can start to get your mindset around that and start sort of at least thinking about, what does that look like for you and your family? And, we're lucky, we've got choices. A lot of people have no choices, right? So it's not just getting ourselves ready, but it's also electing governments that are going to start to tackle the adaptation and be ready for the people that need help, rather than the desperate sort of situations that we continuously see around the refugees flowing out of different parts of the world.
And I think, there was a piece, I think it came out today in CNN, and about the impact of systemic racism in those refugees, and looking at places like Denmark, who were sending Syrians back while the country was still being bombed, but have opened their arms to the Ukrainians.
Yeah.
It's really, those are tough optics to be like, these people who are more like us are welcome, but those people who are different are not. Or the stories about the kids trying to leave Ukraine who are studying there, who are of African descent, being pushed off of trains. And like, the reality is the migration that's going to happen is going to be people of color in large swaths of the world. So we need to get our stuff together in terms of battling that systemic racism that exists, that says, European refugees are more valuable than refugees from somewhere else. That's a whole nother ugly side of what's going on. And we see that with the not dropping, but as the world focuses on Ukraine, and I put something on LinkedIn about this the other day because there was a beautiful piece from a guy who runs a refugee organization, Sasha something, and he said, what I'm conscious of as I look at what we need to do to support Ukraine is how do we also not stop focusing on the refugees of yesterday and the Afghanis, the Syrians, the Ethiopians, the Rohingya, it's just more. And so when you shift the focus, how do you make sure people don't stop thinking about the people whose situation we still haven't resolved?
Yeah.
It's
interesting. It's an interesting point of view, Sam. I mean, for sure, you don't have to forget the people of the past. They are still suffering. You still have to push them through. It ties in a little bit with the fact that the situation as it is now, the result could be a nuclear war, whereby that threat was not there before. So, everybody will be fine. Let's just keep on processing them. They are fighting. They've been fighting for the past 12 years. No worries. We've got a process in place. We've got procedures. Let's just push them through. And now all of a sudden you've got, Russia, what's going on in their control over North Korea, and China, who's definitely not going to be a peace broker, because I think that would be completely freaking naive. The threat is generally there. They just recently let through the guys from the Ukraine to go and fix old Chernobyl. And the only reason they're doing that is so that they can keep on selling power. Because of the sanctions, they're not able to make money elsewhere. Speaking of the sanctions, oil embargoes. Until the decision is made, you can still buy Russian oil. America is importing 20% of Russian oil, and it's a crude, hard oil, and they need that for their distillation plants down in Texas. It's a catch-22, man. It really is.
Yeah. All right. So I totally agree. Let's sort of go through some of the news items that have come up, and we can talk about it. And I want to start off with the food catastrophe as well as the energy hikes. But let's start with the food. So basically, this war has engulfed the breadbasket of the world. And there's a piece in the BBC, which is a really comprehensive piece called Ukraine War, Catastrophic for Global Food. And basically the story is that this is going to deliver a global shock to global supply and cost of food. And we've already started to see it coming. Russia and Ukraine are some of the biggest producers in agriculture and food globally. But Russia also, and this is probably the piece that I think is really important, they also produce an enormous amount of nutrients like potash and phosphate. And these are key ingredients in fertilizer. And basically what they're saying is that we're going to see the amount of food that's available going down, but also the yields from the crops will reduce by 50%. So one of the experts said it's not whether we are moving into a global food crisis, it's how large this crisis will be. So, and then another article in the Economist Intelligence Unit, basically food commodities have gone off the charts, and I'm sure Joe's seeing that in his trading, but grains and vegetable oils are soaring. So if you need to stock up, it's a good time to do it. So just so you know, so Ukraine and Russia are prominent grain exporters, and they account for 30% of global trade in wheat, 17% of maize, and more than 50% of sunflower seed oil. Also, Ukraine supplies about a quarter of the EU cereal and vegetable oil imports. Palm oil prices have hit record highs as well, as people are rushing to secure alternative sources. And we know the history of palm oil. There's a lot of unsustainable palm oil in the supply chain. But then the third thing, the other side of it is that these disruptions are also going to adversely affect livestock and meat markets globally. So we're looking at 40% sort of increases, and that's on top of 40% in 2021. So these are big and fast-moving changes in the cost of food. Any thoughts?
No, Andre, you're absolutely right. It's going to require a lifestyle change in order to accommodate that. And this lifestyle change is, you have to consider it in cycles of what you plant versus what you reap. So if you're going to want to get your own milk, or you want to plant your own vegetables, or you want to be self-sufficient in some sort of way, how long does it take for something to go from seed to fruit? How long does it take if you want to grow cattle or lamb or goats or whatever, or ducks for protein? How long does it take to go from here to there? And anybody who starts now, I mean, and bear in mind when you're looking out to about 6-8 months a year before something changes. It's the same with it's the same with renewable energy versus the oil, the oil extracted from the ground. I hate to sound like I'm jumping on the bandwagon, but I'm quoting Elon Musk here that said, in order for us to achieve success, the countries who have oil, who has that resource, you need to release it. Renewable energy is not something that's going to take over overnight. In order to get to the same level of production, there's a period of production involved. Manufacturing the equipment, doing the resources, putting this, installing whatever you need to install. And for us, in order to achieve that right now, because of what's going on, Russia's oil and gas exports affect something like 30% of the world's total consumption. It's a ridiculous amount. But it's not going to happen overnight. The countries who have access to these resources release them, not keep it at $100 a barrel, as I heard earlier. That's going to stay like that for the rest of the year. Are you kidding me? $100 a barrel. Nothing's going to change. So release that. And then focus on the renewable energy, whatever your flavor takes.
Yeah, I agree. The supply and demand and the increasing costs. It's just, especially from a food perspective, right? This is the stuff that creates revolutions. So the potential for it to destabilize the world, and a tiny percentage of people are going to make a lot of money out of this increasing price of commodities, but basically at the expense of a peaceful world. So I'll give you one example, and this isn't because of Ukraine, but it's all going to be interlinked. So a story broke this week in Reuters that hundreds of bakeries have been shut in Sri Lanka because they've run out of cooking gas. Now, so it's nearly 1,000 have been shut. And basically the reason that they're running out of gas is because Sri Lanka has dwindling foreign exchange reserves. And this is where the majority of developing countries are right now. So, Sri Lanka is experiencing the worst financial crisis in a decade, and their exchange reserves have shrunk by 70%, which means the country is struggling to pay for food, medicine, and fuel. And they're expecting these, 90% of the bakeries to close for good if this is not sorted out soon. And bread prices have doubled. Now, rice is the primary product in the diet of Sri Lankans. But bread is also an important part of their diet. But this is the sort of stuff we're going to see going around the world. In the Middle East, where wheat is like one of the primary basic food commodities. I'm actually quite frightened about that side of things. The really hungry people don't stay quiet, and neither should they. So, maybe this is a chance to show that our global economy is so fundamentally flawed, and it's, we're banked our existence on it for a few decades or a few centuries now, but maybe this is the time to say, while we're at it, we need to change this because we need to change it anyway.
Well, this is the kind of horrible person that I am, but I was thinking intermittent fasting for everyone. When I was thinking about the price of oil and some of these other commodities, yes, I understand a lot of it is, for necessities, but I couldn't help thinking about how Singapore is. And by the way, that's where I live. Singapore has certain things about it which should mean that the consumption for this, that, or the other should go down, right? And so the example is actually for cars, right? We have all these certificates of entitlement, we have these extra taxes, whatever it is. Basically, a car in Singapore is usually goes for about the same price as, I would say, 2 or 3 homes further out in the country in South Africa, any other country in the world, I think. It's just that crazy, right? But yet we consume it. So I think the world has this addiction as well to oil. We talk about how we use it. Why it will remain at $100 is because I heard this commercial a long time ago, which I thought was brilliant. It was a ski resort that said that during the high season we charge more, and why do we do it? Because we can. Yeah. So those who have been keeping oil in reserve haven't been doing it because they just want to keep it, right? It's for this kind of situation where there's a rainy day. But there's also an opportunity in here. So this is their moment. I mean, oil goes through its ups and downs as well. There are times when oil is doing so badly that the industry itself can't survive. It's not as viable. And now, you know, it's just one of those things. It's they're back in demand. They'll keep the supply going out as comfortably as they can. They want to maximize their gains in the short to medium term. And we continue to demand it.
And people will continue to starve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, Canada is a great example of every time there's a holiday weekend, gas prices go through the roof. Like, and you just expect it. You're like, oh, well, I better get my gas at the beginning of this week because by Friday, the price is going to be up by $1.50. And yet everybody still goes to the pumps and they still put the gas in their car to drive to their cottage. So yeah, the haves will keep having, and the have-nots will keep starving.
Yeah.
It reminds me of one of these memes I saw in the week where it says, why don't you take your girlfriend/wife out on an expensive date? And everybody gets dressed up and get in the car and they end up at the gas station.
But I think, Denys, that comes back to, you know, what you were talking about with the threat of nuclear, you know, and how that's grabbed everybody's attention with Ukraine. But that is also the global inequity, right? The powers that have nuclear power are not, you know, that's not happening in sub-Saharan Africa. It's not happening where, you know, so you're still dealing with this elite game that is pummeling the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Well, you say a lead game, but you know whatever they do will definitely affect the rest of the world. You know, Africa is a massive producer of cobalt and various rare metals. If you go out to the western coast of Africa, you get a lot of rice, you get a lot of the grains. If you go down to the southern Africa, and back in the day, Zimbabwe, Malawi, just up north from Malawi, it was the same. It was called the breadbasket of Africa. You know, comparable to the Ukraine. And what happened there absolutely destroyed those, not just the country, but the countries around it.
Oh, it's good that what happened in Zimbabwe with the currency, right? Like,
yeah. Don't even.
Yeah, but wheelbarrows full of cash to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, you know, for my big takeaway, there's the economic infrastructure of the world needs to change. And we are once again being shown proof of why it needs to change. But from the oil and gas perspective, so there's a piece in the New York Times called "How Much Will the US's Ban Hurt Russia?" Did you guys have a chance to have a look at that one?
Yeah. No, I did. Yeah. I did.
So I thought this was interesting. So they're basically talking the turbulence for Russia's oil and gas industry has just begun. It's become toxic to many buyers. But as we know, most of the countries who are saying they're not going to buy it, it won't actually matter until the end of the year. Russia provides about 10% of the world's oil and gas. And the belief is that they're going to focus their sales on Asia. Obviously, China is at the top of that. The thing is, China doesn't pay as much as the European countries pay for the oil and gas from Russia. And in the past, the oil and gas has come out of the Siberian fields and some other sort of older operations. And that's what turned Russia into an oil, giant. But the new fields are being developed in the Arctic, and it's notable for their harsh operating conditions and higher costs. So will China be willing to pay the higher cost to extract the oil and gas from these regions? And I think that's one of the things, like, everything's up in the air. But regardless of all of that, Europe's about to face, or is facing, higher gas prices. Regardless of all of that, the opportunity now is for Europe to say, right, let's make rapid progress and get the oil and gas out of our lives and get renewable energy in place, because that's what the world needs anyway, right? So it's an opportunity as well.
The renewable energy is the way forward, absolutely. The whole oil and gas thing, as this article I saw earlier, until a decision has been made, the regulation is not enforced, meaning that until we decided, okay, this sanction is now in place and it's going in, you can still buy gas and oil from Russia. You can still do it. I mean, out of northern Canada, Samshina, north of Saskatchewan, up to all that. That's Ice Road Trucking, the TV show on Discovery Channel that everybody sees. I mean, this is a good example of that. these are diamond mines and oil and gas mines that are only accessible during the winter times. During the summer times, they are flying choppers over, but yet they are still able to produce product enough to justify a profit in order to operate that facility. So in Scandinavia, in northern Russia, what's Siberia and all those type of places, moving into the Arctic Circle, that's been happening in Canada for decades. It's not a new thing. Yeah.
But the talent of the foreigners have been a pretty active part of that, right? And so now all of that talent has left. So, and which doesn't mean that the Russians don't have the talent to do the jobs, and they're certainly born into a country where they can cope with the weather extremes more. But this is still like territory that, it's like they found Shackleton's ship, right?
Yeah.
It's that sort of territory.
You mentioned talent. I heard on BBC, whatever you can get on YouTube and all those type of places and your news facilities, that certain universities in America and in Canada and in England, France, or the EU countries, the NATO nations, they are opening up their channels for educated people and people who are well studied in order to leave Russia or Ukraine, for that matter, come over and settle in those countries and share the knowledge and stuff there. So I mean, that's another thing. Yeah, absolutely that.
That's how Canada was built.
The opposite of Australia. True. How funny is that?
It's true.
Well, thank you very much.
I don't.
No offense intended.
I can count on one hand the number of second-generation Canadian kids that I went to school with. We were all the children of immigrants. All of us.
Yeah, sure.
All
Ditto,
of us.
baby. Ditto. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No. I trace my. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead. You trace.
I trace back in the day, we traced our family tree back in South Africa to 1741, man. This makes me a 7th generation South African. To think about it, it's actually crazy. A very relative short history, but a lot has happened in that small amount of time.
I think one of the pieces that I thought was so interesting connected to the oil and the situation in Russia was the relationship between China and Russia, and the piece that was written on helping the world understand that everything that's made in China is made with Russian oil.
Yeah.
So everything that you think you're still going to be able to buy from China off of Amazon or whatever, all of that is being produced off the back of Russian oil. So whatever happens there is also going to impact that entire production process. And that's good leverage with China because, they're certainly protectionist against their economy. So that is the only thing that actually made me think, okay, this isn't like the East meets West and it's World War III. There are still a number of really imperative reasons for China to keep Russia in check.
Yeah.
And that I think honestly was the most heartening thing I read. And I mean, you wouldn't think it when you look at the headline or you start reading it, but really it was like, okay, this is, there's some rationality to them keeping this contained.
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
it's China. China is in a very favorable position, right? So between China and Russia, they've got some sort of influence, albeit financial or whatever you want, over North Korea. And North Korea has got the ultimate disclaimer: leave us alone, we're out. We don't want to hear anything from you guys. Shut the hell up. And they just do what they want to do, and they make their own decisions. But their finances come from forced labor, as all of us know, in Siberia and in Russia, in logging camps, in construction camps. They get shipped all over the world to do what they want, as far as Poland and the Ukraine and Slovakia and all that. And all that cash money gets funneled straight to North Korea, and they get to do whatever they do. Now, when it comes to China can't really interfere in Russia's business. Russia's under sanctions, right? So they are now trying to use Chinese credit cards and the Chinese financial system in order to get their various nationalities all over the world, their banking system, keep it running, keep the 600 billion that Putin's got put back, or whatever the number is, keep that running. Now, if you look back in the history of China, Sri Lanka is a very good example. Sri Lanka needed some money. They approached China. China said, "Yeah, no, we'll give you this loan, which is an exorbitant amount, but as a as a balance, you have to give us one of your ports. So as I'm speaking now, China owns Sri Lanka's main port. So anything that goes into Sri Lanka comes through China, literally. And this is in the continent, in the subcontinent. So think about it. So Russia's got diamond mines, they've got gold mines, they've got oil fields. Yeah, exactly, Sam. I mean, it's over Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, all that. They've got the same thing. So now they go into Russia and they say, okay, Russia, look, you've been embargoed, but yeah, we don't care about the rest of the world. We're China. They can come do what the hell ever they want. We stop our exports, everybody stop getting TVs. End of. It's very simple. So you will give you all the money you want, but we are interested in that gas field over there. We want that diamond mine over there. How about that gold mine down there? Oh, and just for security, you've got this little oil thingy going over there, I'll just keep eye on that for you. And all of a sudden, they take over production, they take over transport, they take over the selling of it. Obviously, the terms are such that Russia will never be able to make it. Every single country you're thinking of right now, Sam, is under the same thing. You'll never be able to meet those terms.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Done. I can't imagine that Russia would, if they do, and they're forced to sign into that. Obviously, there's 90% of the world's nuclear weapons are between Russia and America, right? At some point, Russia's going to say, well, we're not putting up with that from China anymore. So the countries that China has succeeded in tend to be militarily weaker countries and poorer countries, whereas Russia, like just seeing what Putin's doing now and wanting the Russian might to be back on the table, I think at some point, if they do accept it, it's going to turn the relationship sour. So, yeah.
No, I agree. I agree. It's a delicate situation, and it's like this article I heard early on. If anybody thinks that China will be in the position to negotiate the peace treaty, so to say, or the no fire, whatever, that's a very naive thought, because they can do, as long as they don't do that, China wins. As long as they don't do that, whatever they decide, they win. So this is something for them to avoid.
Yeah. I always say, when China takes its eye off the domestic ball, it always loses control of its country. So I will be surprised if they change that.
They also don't want Russia setting off a nuke, though. So at some point, they need to stop it.
Yeah.
Well, didn't North Korea yesterday or the day before just test an intercontinental missile again?
Yeah. A new defense system.
Come on. See, China.
Sorry, you were going to say something, Denys? I was just going to say.
No. Go ahead.
An article really worth reading in The Hill is "A Shift to Clean Energy Would Halt Russia's Petro Thuggery and More." And this is really talking about obviously the politics and the history of the oil and gas industry and how they've blackmailed the world. And but what they're doing is, so the big oil is now making lots and lots of money, and also they're leveraging the crisis to call for new policies to expand oil and gas production. So there's another side of this story that's going on in the background that I don't think people are really paying attention to. But if we did manage the shift where the real focus was on renewables, which tend to be national, local even, we have an opportunity. And this is where we're moving. And I know a lot of people still think it's a fantasy, but this is the future where we need to head towards, because we need to take the crises out of the world, especially when it comes to fossil fuels, because they're holding us to ransom, really. And another article on the oil and gas is the link between Putin and climate change. I really want to encourage everyone to read that. And then the human toll and environmental devastation from Russia's war. So if you guys haven't seen this, the prosecutor for the International Criminal Court is already on. It's already started. It's already ongoing. But they've also been given authority to bring charges for damage to the environment. And I think, as far as I know, that's a first. So it's any damage to the environment that is widespread, long-term, and severe. So environmental impacts of war include the release of toxic materials into air, water, and soil from crumpled buildings. So we're seeing that all over Russia. Impaired sanitation systems, exploded pipelines, and damaged industrial facilities like fuel and chemical storage. And I just saw that just before. Yes, exactly. But I also saw another note that there's a Ukrainian scientific lab where they have pathogens and viruses that they're studying. So they've been asked to destroy that lab in case the Russians get hold of it. We also saw that there was all sorts of chemical warfare that Ukraine was ready to launch, which, anyway. But the other thing is that they're worried that the Russians will target Ukraine's hydroelectric dams, as well as toxic mine tailing dams and hazardous waste storage sites. So there's some big environmental risks in the mix of this that is getting the attention it should. And to me, that's one of the bigger concerns, because it's really long term. Did you have a look at any of those ones?
Yeah, no, war is brutal, man. War is brutal. Yeah. As the saying goes, everything is fair in love and war. War is brutal. Out of an attacker point of view, to target those facilities is very beneficial for you because of the disruption it would cause. Out of a victim point of view, those facilities being targeted, man, that's a cat in the house. It's the worst that could happen.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Sam. It's a bad scenario. Please, Sam, go ahead.
Sorry, the conflict in the exclusion zone is the thing that bothers me the most about that. Like the disruption in the Red Forest and most of the world. I mean, a lot of people just don't even know about it. So you have all of this highly radioactive soil that is now being disturbed and sent up and out into and there is some times where I just want to shake or slap people who are making these decisions, because if you make the entirety of the Ukraine radioactive through your occupation, you have achieved nothing. You now have a radioactive country that you are in charge of. Well done. That nobody can occupy, that can't produce wheat, that can't produce all of the things that the world and his economy needs. And I mean, Canada's the land of natural resources. I totally understand that Ukraine has natural resources they have their eyes on. It's got nuclear reactors. It's got all those things. But none of those will matter if they're all contaminated.
Well, maybe that is the goal, to completely destroy the country.
Just
exactly. If you can't stay there, nobody else can stay there.
Exactly. It's like, well, to destroy it and show what you're capable of doing, right? So the story that Sam's talking about, it's in Inside Climate News. It's Chernobyl is not the only nuclear threat Russia's invasion has sparked in Ukraine, and it's talking about the Red Forest. And basically, because this forest is so contaminated, it's also got a lot of tinder, so nobody's been in the forest. And if that catches on fire, it's not just going to be dangerous for the Ukraine. The nuclear pollution could go wherever the wind takes it. So that is a real risk. And there's 15 other reactors that are running elsewhere in the country that are also at risk. So the nuclear conversation wasn't as prevalent this week, though, right? Did you notice that? There wasn't that as much talk as there had been in the first couple of weeks.
Well, I was thinking about the nuclear thing and thinking about how nuclear weapons can be used, right? If you think historically, and they've only been used twice, and both times by America, and it was for the purpose of convincing a country to stop fighting, right? So the dynamics of how nuclear weapons might be deployed now, this is an area that's never been. If a weapon is fired in aggression, it'll be the first time ever. And the question also is now, what do you do with that? Because it's the idea has always been, and the thinking has always been about, I have one so that you won't, right? And it's never been the other way around, that I'm prepared to use it. So that's the situation that we have. So I don't know whether there is. Are we in a situation where we really can't contemplate this as something that can really happen? As in, like, do we really take it seriously, or do we just kind of go like, no, it can't because it's so unthinkable? I was thinking about how the world was before 9/11. People weren't prepared to think that a plane would be flown into a building, right? It just wasn't a thing. And I remember when I heard about the first tower, and I was in the media industry, and I heard rumors about it, and some of them said they were investigating whether it's a terrorist situation, and I said, no, it can't be. This must be an accident. And then the second one goes in, and then I found it interesting that after that, every plane that went near a building, I was thinking, oh no, I hope it doesn't. It changes the way we think about things. So I'm really wondering if there is a way that we can play out the moves of a nuclear attack. Can anyone launch a nuclear attack? I mean, the whole point is mutually assured destruction, right? So yeah. Who can move, right? It's a chess move that isn't playable.
So the conversation around who was really going to ever launch a nuclear attack, it was always going to be a rogue state, rogue actor. India and Pakistan, that was always seen as the highest risk of two countries potentially setting off nuclear weapons. And that was a report I read years ago. And, it was such a small amount of nuclear weapons that needed to be launched before, I think we talked about it last week, with global warming would increase to 8 degrees and basically nobody can survive that. Cockroaches might do it. And I suppose the question in all of our minds is, Putin's saying this stuff, right? He's expressing, I am willing to use these weapons. And we don't know if he is or not. And I think that's the thing. When it came down to the line, would he use them? And because there's so much confusion around him and his mental state, and, there's 50 different opinions on why he's doing what he's doing. And we're all trying to work out, well, who's right and who's wrong. And we don't know. And I think that's where the fear and insecurity about the future comes from, because we just don't know. We don't know what he's capable of doing, and he seems capable of doing anything.
Oh, that's a fair statement, man.
I think the problem, right? The problem most times is that we're very poor judges, one of ourselves and then of others, in terms of what we do when we are in a heightened state. Yeah. And we've all, I don't know whether you have, but I'll speak for myself. I've caught myself doing something where I'm like, wait, hang on, I don't do this, right? Because you're pushed to that point. I was thinking about it when Sam was saying, having to shake and slap, right? I was thinking, oh, only a mom feels that feeling, right?
I want to bang their heads together.
Only with adults. I don't shake or slap my kids.
No, what I'm saying
I'm happy to put Putin in timeout until he has thought about what he has done and considered the consequences.
Yeah,
and then he can start the process of reparations.
It's the better side of us that actually prevents us from doing the shaking and slapping. I mean, that's really the fact. There are days when you just go like, I want to do something. When I think about it, and maybe again, I could be just exposing myself to it here, but there are times when I read a story about someone, enacting violence, killing somebody else, and I go like, I can kind of understand, and I think with Putin, it's about the length of the story. I think most of us think about it today. I arrive at work and the situation is like this. How would I react? Putin's been at this for a really long time. And if you were to look at if you look at the litany of sins committed against Russia and maybe against the legacy of Russia, the West has a lot to answer for, in terms of what it said it would do, wouldn't do, and in the end, what they did. So I think a lot of times Russia's been, despite, Russia has moved from superpower to punchline. And there's only so much sometimes you can do, especially if you've been the captain of that ship for a while. If you weren't the person in charge and you didn't feel so connected to it, you might not take it as personally. But this is a long time coming. It's not one of those things that happened just today.
I love that, the superpower to punchline, and I think it's. But then he's had 20 years leading the country to turn the country around and bring it into its fullest potential, and he hasn't done it. So, this idea that he deserves respect because he's the leader of this amazing country, which I do believe Russia is an amazing country, but the people are still struggling to survive. He hasn't maximised the opportunities. He hasn't prepared the country for the future. He's still banking on fossil fuels as the economic saviour of the country. I mean, he's gotten so much wrong, as far as I'm concerned, as the leader of the country. And I think that's, like the answer to the challenge that we all face right now is the people in Russia rising up. The only way we can stop this, from what I'm seeing, is the people rise up. And I hope they do, and I know that people are suffering terribly for protesting, but the more and more and more people that stand up and go out into the street, the greater the chance that we do have of ending this. Because, we saw there was a negotiation in Turkey with the Ukraine, and the Russian foreign minister has no chance. They're expecting Ukraine to what do you call it? Call a ceasefire, surrender. Of course, the Ukrainians are not going to do that. We've got all of the European and American leaders meeting in Versailles this weekend to talk about what they're going to do. I mean, but the reality is, the answer to this is always within the country where the problem lies, and that's the people of Russia. And then I've been reaching out to my friends in Russia, and they're not in Russia, but Russians in the world, and they're having a terrible time. People are talking to them so badly. They're treating them like shit. This isn't Russian people doing this. This is Putin and his cronies. And but yeah, the only chance we've got. Sorry, Denys, do you want to jump in? We'll go into the business bit.
Yeah, no, look, it's Andre, it's one of those cases whereby everybody else is suffering because of somebody else's indecision, right? It's common throughout the world. You can equate it to first world countries like America and Britain and all that. Let's call it the Brexit. Let's call it any latest vote in the USA. Everybody suffers because of somebody else's inequality, or a decision about inequality. I've seen a lot online about Russians not agreeing what's happening in Russia. They are outside in the UK, they are in France, they're in Thailand for that matter, wherever, pick your country, expats. And these expats are trying to communicate with their family members and friends back in Russia. And the stories they give each other are not matching up, and nobody's willing to concede to each other's side, meaning that me being a son, for the sake of this discussion, I'm phoning my dad in Russia and saying to him, "No, dude, what the hell is happening over there?" And then he says to me, no. Look, this is what's all over us. It's propaganda, right? So this is what's happening, and this is what we believe because this is what all we see. So you send look, well, no, this is from the front line. You give the hard evidence, and yet it's still not. And it's gotten to a point where there's become a division between these people, the people who are expats living outside and receiving free and open news and information sources versus the people who are stuck in Russia or the Ukraine, for that matter. I mean, people trying to do goodwill. I mean, uncommon courage for me is about people trying to have uncommon courage and go beyond. Something funny, Vladimir Klitschko, the world WBA heavyweight boxing champion of the world, him and his whole family, they signed up to go fight for the Ukraine. They're Ukrainian, and off they go. This guy is selling his gold medal to the Olympics that he won. He put it up for auction. Somebody paid $1 million for it and said, "Look, mate, here's your medal back. Here's $1 million. Go fight the war." I mean, this is the type of influence you have. Whereby in Russia, I'm going to say something now, and I don't know anything about it, but I'm going to take a risk. I'm Russia. I'm sure none of that's happening. None of that's happening.
Well, they don't even think a war's happening. I mean, the fake news and the propaganda, like they are literally getting information that there is no war in Ukraine, and it's all bull and
special
of
military
course,
operation.
Yeah, and
exactly.
And the Ukraine's ready to invade Russia with chemical warfare. So they're getting a completely different perspective. But
because they're Nazis.
Yeah.
That's the narrative. Right?
I'm laughing. It's fucking hilarious. Well done. Sorry.
I hate for the idea that someone at that very moment joined the stream, and then they heard that they go like, because they're Nazis. Yeah.
I spoke about. Go ahead, Joe.
No, we have someone who's just commenting now, and because I'm not sure exactly when it was this comment came in, I'll just accept that it was for everything we've been saying so far. Makes a lot of sense, guys.
Yeah, take it where it's coming from, by the way.
All right, so just want to quickly sort of capture some of the news from a business perspective. We're seeing more than 300 countries that have withdrawn from Russia, but one of the pushes in the Ukraine leadership have asked is for Russia to be completely unplugged from the global internet. and there's this group called ICANN, which stands for the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And basically, they're in charge of internet governance. If you've been in the technology industry, you know ICANN. For everybody else, you'll have no idea what they are. But basically, they've said an emphatic no. It's one world, one internet. We've seen China's build their own sort of internet behind closed walls. And, you know, for me, it's you start taking the internet out. The information war is a critical part of the fight that's going on right now. And if you take it away, we're depriving the people all over the world, but especially in Russia, with a tool for sharing information. Whether we agree with that information or not is irrelevant. It's going to set a dangerous precedent and, you know, security and privacy in the future. But I think we need to keep the information channels open. So I do agree with that. But look, you know, I saw TikTok. If you're a Russian user on TikTok, you're not allowed to post. And I don't know. I don't know if that's the right choice, you know. Then we saw just today, Facebook have announced that you can say down with the Russian something, you know, and that won't be banned as hate speech. So they've kind of changed the hate speech rules for this time, you know. So there's some stuff going on. I'm not necessarily convinced it's the right stuff. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts on that, seen any of that. I think, Denys, you saw the Facebook one, right?
How crazy is that? I mean, Facebook takes an incredibly staunch stance against anything being set to whatever's happening in America and the presidential elections. And, you know, you spread, I don't want to spread it across the board. And then all of a sudden they said, and they used this quote in that article, if I'm not mistaken, I hope I remember it correctly, down with Russian bosses or something like this. What?
And down with Russian invaders. It was down with Russian invaders. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, what on earth? Facebook's all of a sudden, yeah, no problem. You can go ahead and do that. If it's directed to Russia, yeah, off you go.
Yeah.
I mean, what the?
We need to be careful. I think there's a lot of pressure, and I don't think, I think, you know, responding to the pressure and being seen to do the right thing, to be in, in alignment with the world and what we're doing. You know, we need to do everything we possibly can, but I think there's a line, and information channels they're important. They're really important right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
look, Andrea, you can't speak bad about Russia at all. You can't say a single bad word about Russia, but you can say every single bad word you want about Australia, for that matter. Use every word in your vocabulary and off you go. I mean, this is the same. It's insane. It's absolutely insane. That's the double standard is mind blowing.
Yeah.
Sorry, well, I was going to say, in terms of trying to police, it's always very difficult. I always think that civility requires sometimes uncivility, right? You know, to make it happen. So this is the kind of thing that happens. We are trying to balance something. We're trying to to allow people, so to speak, on the so-called good side of things. And when you feel that you're on the right side of history, then you kind of feel a bit more empowered. I mean, I just recall things that I said as a child, which now I'm pretty appalled I did, because I just felt I was on the right side at the time, you know.
Yeah. The concept of the right side.
Yeah, it's subjective, isn't it?
I mean, look, there's some. I again, how my crazy mind works, right? I was just thinking about how at the time there were some people who were pretty cool, pretty happening, and then thought, yeah, Hitler's Youth, good idea, you know.
All right. I just want to finish with one story that I didn't have a chance to send to you guys, so I only picked it up today. Joe and my friend Eugene Wee shared it. So, Joe, you might need to help me with the name of this minister. So it's Senior Minister Tharman
Shanmugaratnam.
There you go. Easier said.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's called How Countries Can Respond to a Perfect Long Storm. And I really want to encourage everyone to read this. I'm going to share it in my weekend read. So one of the perspectives of international politics that I always listen to is the Singapore politicians. There's a different tone, because it's an Asian country that is in Asia, but it's also strongly allied with the West. So the diplomacy and the language for me is always, I believe it's always very powerful and worth listening to. I'm not saying they get everything right, but he's talking about 5 fragilities, right? So obviously, number 1, Ukraine. And he says, and so it's a transcript of his speech, but I'll just capture just a couple of points that I thought was really important. So number 1, there is no realistic prospect of of a trajectory with a good outcome coming out of the war, or that leaves any major country better off than before. It is only a question of how bad the outcomes will be. The situation will likely get worse before it can get better, but none of the trajectories is going to lead the world to a better place. Pretty powerful, right? Number two, inflation. Man. Beyond Ukraine itself, it is the ramifications for the world that we should be most concerned about. And we were talking about that earlier. It's already begun. Number three, climate. It is no longer possible to make the adjustments needed to tackle the climate crisis without ensuring energy security. The Ukraine war has forced that. We've been talking about it. Number four, global health security, a real challenge that we have to prepare for. The pathogens are coming. The risks have been accentuated by global warming, the loss of biodiversity, deforestation, and increased human incursions into the natural world. And he's really talking about how we're going to get through this pandemic, and then there's going to be another one and another one. So it's not a cheery read. And then number five is less inclusive growth. Within and across nations, there is a real risk of rollback in the gains that the developing and emerging world has made in the last 2 to 3 decades. Expecting other structural shifts, geopolitical instabilities, higher food and energy prices, and slower growth, and the fact that both climate change and pandemics will hit the poorest and the most vulnerable countries the hardest. So not necessarily a pleasant wrap up, but I think if we can face it, and we can say this is where we are, and this is potentially what will come if we continue to play the game like we've always played the game, or do we say it is time to fundamentally change as a global society because we need to anyway if we have any chance of overcoming the challenges that we face? So
I think I mentioned it on last week's show. I think it was where I said it, right? I was talking about when I look at the world as people driving in traffic, and too many times people spend time complaining, blasting their horn, staying in the same lane. And I think what you need to do really is use your steering wheel. Just move, change paths, do what you need to do to get going. I think that all this is true if we do nothing positive, right? And in terms of like, if we talk about where the world is going to end up, yes, there'll be a price to pay, but this will be like a correction in the market. We're going to try and find our way back on a path, get to a point. I mean, look, we had the Second World War to tell us there'll never be a war like this ever again. And then now we're like, oh, well, maybe, but we're going to learn from this. We're gonna move to a hopefully better place. And who knows? I mean, this could be the birth of democracy in countries like China and Russia, where if this nonsense becomes too much, if I think what's really helping China sort of stay on the outside of this actually, and I'm always hesitant to bring up this idea of race, but it really is about the difference in race that allows these sorts of things to happen. The whole idea about why, for instance, refugee crises are different now, as in like what people are trying to do and how much help is coming in. It's because now a lot of the other people in Europe see themselves in the Ukrainians. The Chinese don't see themselves in the Ukrainians. What would be very interesting actually is if the Ukrainians got together and said, look, let's show the rest of China how many Chinese people live here, because we've had it's an interesting story. We had some Singaporeans who were in Ukraine, and they were doing work and supporting people and what have you, and they were there for a while. It's not a huge number, but I think when you can see when you can see yourself on the other side of the fence, that really, really helps people see it. So when I think when people look at an insurrection, like when the Chinese maybe look at something like 6th January, the insurrection, and they see those crazy Americans doing it, it doesn't feel the same as when there's a protest in Hong Kong. Even though it's very different, but there's some similarities there as well. And how people feel about that's because you have to look for yourself in the story.
Yeah. Oh, there's a huge part of that, but I think it goes back to the first week where we really started to talk about the Ukraine war with the refugees, and I've seen a lot of the coverage, and Sam, you were talking about it, and the racism towards non-Ukrainians, but also like this is, I think it's part of Putin's strategy that Europe can't take on another wave of refugees, and Europe's role, if they're not going to be actively engaged in the war, I believe their role is to take care of the people to get them through this time, and that's their participation in the war. And if they don't do it, and if we see what we saw with the Syrian refugees and the refugee crisis that's still going on across Europe, right? And refugees used as fodder by countries like Belarus. The terrible disrespect towards these people who are suffering. But I actually think it's part of the war effort to take care of the refugees, and if they can do it for the long term or as long as it's needed, it takes away one potential for Putin to win. So I hope Europe stays strong. I really do.
I think the refugee calculation is one I feel that it's one that Putin miscalculated based on just thinking about invasion and refugees in a very in the same way as he was invading other countries. I mean, it's shameful that it's a fact. It's a factor. But yeah, the racial makeup of the invaded country makes a difference, because the way the pressure comes off, or the people, your neighbors, are willing to help out, is very different. I mean, the way the neighbors around Ukraine have rallied, it's just amazing. I wanted to just take a very quick moment to talk about like cryptocurrencies as well, right? Because I mean, talk about when the world's difficult and all the stuff's happening. Ukraine, being the kinds of government that they had, they're actually raising funds using crypto, and they have been very successful that way. In a matter of I think days, they raised something like $36 million US dollars, and the number keeps going up because what they've been able to do is allow or encourage cryptocurrency donations. And it's actually given them, that access to the financial tools that they need for the financing of war, which is something people don't often think about.
Yeah. Well, and Biden just shored that up with his announcement, right? That the U.S. would investigate whether or not.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I think a couple of weeks ago, you guys spoke about the cryptocurrency, and I said when the war started, Ukraine opened up a facility whereby you can donate Bitcoin, Bitcoin, read everything else coin, to the Ukraine, and within something like 12 hours, they made up like $8 million or something ridiculous. But at the same time, if you follow, Joe, I'm sure you follow it. If you follow the progression of the Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency from then to now, it's gone through a cycle of increasing by 15 and decreasing by 18. So that's a 3% loss on your total initial investment. But nevertheless, you are totally helping out the guys that are suffering. I mean, Airbnb, a lot of people, I've been reading a lot of stuff about Airbnb and hotel reservations and restaurant reservations, where people will get online and book accommodation somewhere in the Ukraine. I mean, name your city, whatever, and pay for a week, for example, transfer them and not pitch up and say to the guy who's advertising the Airbnb, look, mate, any refugees that comes in, send them in there. You paid for, you're getting the bucks, hook these people up. And a lot of them have done that. You read online about restaurants, restaurant managers, chefs that open up their restaurants for refugees and say, everybody needs something to eat. Here's some food for you guys. Off you go. I think that the humanitarian side, as Andrea likes to say, the humanitarian aspect and the humanitarian approach is there. It's definitely there. I think my humble feeling is that a lot of the Russian people don't know what's really going on, and they are questioning what is happening. They are, which is why we
can't cut off their access.
Exactly.
You can't cut off it's so short-sighted, and kind of like the first thing we do in crisis as crisis communications people is envisage the end of the line. Where do we want to be? What does success look like? What are all of the possible outcomes? There's no outcome for Russia whereby you cut off the Russian people to all outside influences of information and they rise up. And we all know we need them to rise up, which means you need to keep them on all of these social platforms. You need to keep that access. And yes, you're going to have a couple Muppets who are saying something that is, either just bollocks or it's propaganda or whatever. Yeah. But you're also going to have a mass of people who share stories like these in Ukraine, who see they can book an Airbnb, who find ways to unite, to talk, to like that freedom of information and freedom of speech can't be cut off just because you don't like what the country's doing.
Yeah. Sam, you're absolutely right, man. Yeah, the rise up, that's the only common, I don't know what you call it in English, but the only common comparable, whatever, throughout history. Whenever there's an oppression, I mean, if you go back to the Roman times, the Egyptian times, you can trace history back all the way. I mean, you mentioned Nazis back in the day. There's the only result of that is a rise in the population. Not everybody is going to agree with this position they've been forced to be put in, and there's somebody that they will rebel. I mean, South Africa, apartheid, the protests we used to have back in the day. I mean, we still have them right now in France. France is famous for protesting. They do not agree with these people, and they rise up. This is very much, in my humble opinion, something that's going to happen. That the Russians are going to stand up and say, if you don't believe what you guys are telling us, we absolutely think it's BS, and we are going to change our thoughts.
Probably led by the mothers of Russian soldiers.
Oh,
hell hath no scory like a mother scorn, or hell hath no fury like a mother scorn.
Oh yeah. All right. Can we? So I'm going to move things along. There's so many other articles that I shared with you guys. So humanity or the lack of. There's a lot of sexual traffickers exploiting the refugee situation. Keep an eye out for that. The fake news and propaganda that's going on. It's a big story. It's an overwhelming story. I know a lot of people are struggling with it. We are already being impacted. Next time you go to the supermarket and you can't find sunflower oil, or it's doubled in price, you're gonna see that we're already being impacted by it. Think of the people in the poorest parts of the world; they're going to be the ones that are really suffering. We've got 40 countries on the risk of famine, so 100% confirmed that the box has been ticked. But the reality is, we've got 40 countries in famine, and we've got some big problems in the world, and this is the last thing we need. And everyone get involved in the information more. And if you can speak Russian, write Russian, or you know somebody Russian, work out how you can help them get information into the country, because I think that's going to be our best bet. So should we move on to the environment?
One more thing. Did you see they are willing to pay multilingual mercenaries to go and fight for the Ukraine? $2,000 a day.
Yeah. Are you going?
No, I can't speak Russian. Give me a couple of months. Look, I want to speak about International Women's Day. This is what I'm here for. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, so we'll just quickly go through the environment stuff that's come out this last week, and then we're going to get onto equality. All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so I think it might have been hard to have missed the floods in Sydney. Absolutely catastrophic. But of course, Scotty, the Prime Minister of Australia, impressed me once again when he said, "No point tackling climate in Australia if emissions keep rising in the developing world."
Not my problem.
Yeah. So the stuff that Australia extracts out of the ground sends to the developing world and then buys back as products. But also Australia is one of the countries with the highest per capita pollution levels. So it's time to do something, and it's good to lead rather than follow. BlackRock is in the news, in the headlines again for greenwashing. So I don't know if you guys, it is the largest investor in the world, and its CEO has been sort of up there in the last couple of years saying we're going to do everything we can and advising people not to do the wrong thing. Anyway, Greenpeace had their freedom of information request agreed to, and it's revealed emails that are showing that BlackRock is behaving otherwise. There's the UN IPCC report, which of course is not getting enough coverage. Please look out for the articles. One is Q&A, has the IPCC's bleak warning of climate breakdown been heard? And that's a really good piece. And it really talks about, will adaptation be enough? And basically, once we hit a point in the heat rising, there's nothing that we can do. And then it's also talking about the next assessment that's going to come up, which is all around mitigation. Final piece I really want to highlight is climate crisis in the Guardian. Amazon rainforest tipping point is looming. I read an expert on the Amazon quite a few years ago now who said that we had already passed the tipping point in the Amazon, but this is showing 75% of the untouched forest has lost stability since the early 2000s. So we've talked about the Amazon becoming a savanna before. It will completely change global weather patterns because the moisture in the forest goes up into the clouds and does things that's predictable, and that's all going to be over soon. So some big stuff.
And I've got something to say about that Amazon thing. Not the Amazon, the Sahara for that matter. There's been studies being done that prove that if you populate a quarter of the Sahara with solar panels on its perimeters, you'll be able to provide enough electrical energy, providing you can store it in the salt batteries or the chemical batteries or the iron batteries, in order to supply the world. But something that caught me by surprise was that once you install the infrastructure for these facilities, hundreds of square kilometers worth of solar panels that provide shade and cooling and temperature variations, differentiations, all of a sudden animals and insects and that type of stuff are going to move into these cooler shades once they migrate and all that. And this has been proven over the years, whether you believe in evolution or not, but it's been proven over the years that the Sahara has only been a desert for 10,000 years. Prior to that, it was a tropical jungle. So once we install this type of stuff, it will change the environment in a significant way, to the sense that you put these facilities in, all of a sudden you'll go from a desert to a environment that encourages the reproduction of various plants and animals and that type of stuff. So even though we get free electricity and the fossil fuel and the CO2 gases and the greenhouse gases gets minimized and blah 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 blah, you can go down that road. But the impact of that is something that's still theoretical, and how that will impact the global weather systems is something that can only be speculated on. It's a very interesting topic, man. I've been because it makes sense. The Sahara Desert's got sun, it's warm, it's got everything. Put solar panels on, everything is great. But these solar panels, like the clouds, reflect the UV rays. They reflect the light back into the atmosphere. So all of a sudden, you don't have the same heat dispersion. You don't have you lose all of that type of stuff. You literally take the UV and send it straight back out to space. But that's stuff that people don't often consider when coming to this. So how would we know what the reaction would be? We don't. We've never done it. So I think the whole Amazon point, people call it the lungs of the world, and I've read a lot of different points, and especially in opposition to that. But the reality is, the large forest mass on our planet create a stable environment, exactly
environment, right? And that's what we mess with if that goes. We've seen more. I don't know if they're cyclones or hurricanes or what they are. On the west coast of countries like Australia and India, where they're not even prepared for those sort of things, because that never happened before, right? So it's the radical weather patterns, and they're going to change quickly, and they're going to hit places that aren't used to it. The sort of typhoons that you see coming through the Philippines, right? And they're getting bigger, and they're lasting longer, and they're staying longer. If they start going into different parts of the world who don't have that preparation, from the physical structures that people live in, or they're not prepared for it, then we just or the crops that are grown in a place will be decimated. So it's and this is short-term stuff coming our way that we're not going to be prepared for, and that's where the devastation is going to come.
We also lose all the carbon that the Amazon sequesters.
There's that too. Yep.
None of it is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I just lost my camera over
here. You're still here. We can hear you, but you're paused. And
I don't know.
Open, so that's a good sign.
You're having a Rodin. You're having a Rodin thinker moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love that. I don't know what happened. I touched a Y on the side here, and all of a sudden it went for Oh boy.
The nice smoldering away in our shot here.
I'll take you. I'll take you off and bring you back on. See if that makes a difference. You're still paused from what I can see. Yeah. So look, you know, the reality. Whatever we think about it, we have to be creating rapid change right now. And if we don't, the suffering will get greater. And that's it. You know. So if we're willing to have greater suffering, then okay. But I'm going to keep talking about it. I'm going to keep sharing stuff on it. You know, Sam's helping me with my daily climate tips. She's doing the fabulous designs, and I'm just going to keep just putting the message out there because we've got to wake up to the urgency. And I honestly, it's like I don't think people are facing up to the repercussions of this war, and I don't think people are facing up to the repercussions of the climate emergency. So just keep talking about it and see if we can get more people on board. That's all we can do, right? And never give up. Never give up hope. It's
a combination. It is the combination of the skill and the message, right? I think that's really something that most times we tend to forget about it. We send people who are not prepared into situations where they're supposed to be the voice, to try and be the message, right? And not everybody is a Thunberg. Not everybody has got the charisma and the presence to carry it. Most people who try that come across maybe not in the best way. So sometimes you end up in a situation where, you know, they're not the best rep you could choose. I mean, basically what I'm saying. So there's almost a need for an academy, and this is the terrible Singapore solution to everything. Let's have a campaign. Let's have a schooling system. But there should be a campaign. You know, there should be a kind of teaching system where, sure, come on in. You want to be an environmentalist? Great. Let's also make part of it communications. You need to have communications as part of your training.
It's called UWC.
No.
United World Communications.
There is. But just so you know, there is more and more of that happening, and I'm in the process of putting together like a document where I'm going to sort of just talk through it and how you do it and the pitfalls and the opportunities. And I think more and more people are talking about that. And you know, I'll work with any climate scientist who wants to go out there and talk, who struggles with their communication. I'll work with anyone who's got a great message to help them have a voice in the world. But that is happening, Joe. It's happening a lot. And there's a lot of youth movements where they're doing it as well. So the WWF are working with big corporates like Deloitte, and they're helping to train them. So it's as long as it's the right training, because there's still a lot of bullshit in that space, right? If you're in the communication space and you have the abilities, definitely I would recommend. I mean, I'm going to take on that role of doing what I can to help people, and I hope other people do it too. And I know Sam's doing it, so help however you can. And if you're a communicator and you're passionate about the future, teaching people the skills of communication, I think, is a critical job.
Yeah, you know, Andrea, you're very accurate about the skills of communication. It's an education thing. I mean, nowhere in school, when either of us, you know, went back into school, did you have an opportunity where they tried to teach you this is how you talk, and this is how you take people's perceptions. Don't take offense to what they're saying. Respect people's opinions and all that type of stuff. Get your point across. Nowhere is that being taught. You know, we are learning this as we're going along. You know, it's literally a matter of, you know, hard knocks life. You bump your head and you realize, okay, well, I made an error. Let me change something, or ask somebody, how do I achieve what I want to achieve, and that type of stuff. So yeah, no, going back to what you were saying about that, you know, it needs to come back to the roots. You know, it needs to come back to what are you trying to say? What is your real intent? Use the words you want to use. You know, if it's foul words, if it's very descriptive words, it doesn't matter. Use words you want to use. Yeah. But what are you trying to say? What is your point? You know, it's a life lesson I'm still learning, to be honest.
Yeah, a lot of people disagree with that, but I absolutely, you know, just because you don't like people communicating in a different way, like using foul language or whatever, I think you've got to communicate in the way that's appropriate for you and your audience. So if you're, you know, like Aussie Man Reviews, right? He's swearing all the time, but people love him for it. And just because you don't doesn't mean his message isn't important and it's not hitting the right people. So you've got to have your message. in your way to your audience, and it might be different to somebody else's, but the message is fundamentally the same. It's just told in a different way, and we need lots of different people telling the story in lots of different ways to reach lots of different people. So the copycat stuff that's going on a lot, try not to do that. Try and be unique. Try and be yourself. But yeah, so I'm taking on a role. I've got something I'm going to launch soon, I hope. But we can all do that, right?
Do what you can, man. Do what you can. Every little bit counts. You know, if you can take a teaspoon and empty the sandpit, you know, take your teaspoon and empty the empty the sandpit. I'm sorry.
That's all right. We've only had 2 so far. I was expecting more.
No, it's pretty good.
No. This is who you are, right? International Women's Day, the frustration. So that's the theme for this week. And I'll just do a quick intro. I'm going to hand it over to you guys, but for many years, I've been challenging International Women's Day, and it's definitely not because I didn't believe in it, but because I've just not seen any change. And I remember back in 2013, I was working at Microsoft, and there was this lady from McKinsey talking at this International Women's Day event. And when I was listening to her and listening to the data and the business case and all that sort of stuff, I put my hand up and I said, I just feel that you're trying to stuff women into a system that's been created for men. Don't you think it's time that we actually created a new system that's actually good for both? Because the existing system isn't actually good for men. So the idea of holding on to it is, something that makes the majority of people unhappy is always something I've struggled with. But anyway, it's nearly a decade later, and I was really kind of pleased this year to see that I wasn't the only person sort of speaking up against what International Women's Day has become. Because equality slipped back by a generation during COVID, and the system has completely failed women in the last couple of years. So we've got a system that just allows women to fail at every level, whether they're in the business world, whether they're at home taking care of their kids, and in a pandemic expecting them to do both, especially for single mothers. So it's been a devastating time for women around the world, and like in wealthy countries, it's been an extremely challenging time, especially for women at the bottom of the financial rungs and women of color, but of course also in the developing world. There's some basic stuff that can be done. Like I read an article on renewable energy availability for women in rural India. If that was available, it would lift the entire country, because the girls would be able to go to school, the mothers would be able to work because they're not spending all of their day out collecting firewood and water and doing basic things because they have energy. So nothing's changing. It's getting worse. The business case is made. Businesses make more money when they have more women in leadership roles. Countries' GDP increases when we have women in leadership roles. All of the issues that we've talked about today in the future for humanity, we need 50-50 representation at the table. I was talking to an inclusion expert the other day. She still doesn't understand what the hell's going on and why it's not changing. It's very frustrating. Who wants to talk first?
I can say something about women empowerment and empowerment of the majority, of the minorities. Look, I grew up in South Africa. I was born in the 80s, so it was a very significant point of time in the history of South Africa, transitioning from the apartheid government, going over to when Nelson Mandela in 94 took over and we became a democratic government up until where we are now. In this instance, I don't think it's worth differentiating between, discrimination towards women versus discrimination towards minorities. In order to achieve equality, what they decided to implement was something they call BEE, Black Economic Empowerment. So let's forget about the Black aspect. Let's think about the economic empowerment. So this means anybody in the disadvantaged side. And in our instance, it's women of color, it's anybody who's not a man. Specifically in South Africa state, not a white Afrikaner or not a white Afrikaans Englishman. So by realizing that there's an indifference, now you have to create opportunity for the minority to come in. Now the minority has been disadvantaged over years, schooling, university, opportunities given, social interactions, barefoot pregnant in the kitchen, if I dare use that term, but I mean, it's a very inclusive term, okay? So now you open up this environment to which one side has not been prepared for at all, in any sense of the word. They've been actually educated and prepared for something totally different. So now, in order to achieve success, business success, financial success, whatever, you have to include these people. So some people are just going to be brought in arbitrarily. Yeah, no, you one of these, you match the profile, boom, you come, here's some bucks, here's an office, off you go, you don't have to do jack, enjoy your life. Now, doing that, meaning the actual setup does not change. On paper, it changes. You've got the representation of the nation, females, males, of color, ethnicity, whatever. It doesn't matter, but you've got the representation on paper. But the honest business structure does not change. It remains the same. So you're including more expenses, you're including less experience, you're including something that is not acute to the business, purely just to achieve the requirements set out by law. And that's not going to be a success. I mean, if you open up a vegetable stand and I say to you, okay, Andrea, you're a white female from Australia, you open up a vegetable stand and you decide to open it up in X country. So you're the boss. So the ethnic makeup of the country is this. It's, pick whatever skin color you decide is appropriate. The male to female ratio is made up of this. So your board of directors, the ownership, the management structure, the employee structure, all that type of stuff has to represent that, meaning that every percentage that each section represents throughout the pie, so to say, your business has to represent that. If it doesn't, you don't get tax breaks. You don't get, you're not able to grow. There's a whole bunch of penalties that goes along with this. And it's not fair. It's absolutely not fair. You are putting somebody in a position whereby they have to produce what they have to produce with a skill level, a labor level, requirements that are not viable. It's not a fair way to do things, man. It's not a fair way to do things.
And it takes time for that transition to sort of happen, where the skills and the confidence come in. And, and with women, and I totally agree on the diversity front. To me, they're the same issues. But one of the things is women are being put into these positions of power. And first of all, they're being discredited because the only reason they got the job is because they're female. So whether or not they earned the right to the job is always on the table, and it makes people behave towards them in an unsupportive way. But the other side is, exactly. But the other side is they're put into these positions, and there's so much resentment within the business because men are put aside for some of these roles or not given the opportunities that they've worked hard towards. And I've had loads of conversations with guys about this, and I think that's not fair either. But so a lot of women are put into these positions and then they're not supported to be successful. And then, when they fail, everyone's like, well, of course she was going to fail because, she's a woman, and that's why we don't have women in leadership roles. So we've just got this whole kind of idea wrong, and we're not.
It's a stigma, man.
Yeah.
It's a stigma.
Yeah.
I have so much to say about this. We don't have enough time.
Okay, go.
Let the shaking and strangling begin.
I'm sitting down. Go.
I mean, the whole thing is just it's a giant hairball of mass confusion and difficulties. And, we talk about diversity and gender equality in the same vein, except that also then you have diverse women who are even more, face greater challenges, and it's all ugly and messy. But the point that I wanted to make is there are a couple of things that I've seen recently that also made me think, I saw a post from a woman on LinkedIn the other day who was a woman of color, and her whole post was, stop calling me strong, stop calling me capable, stop calling me resilient, when I also want to be soft and kind and feminine. And she talks about this and it's kind of this construct that you're talking about that we put women in, and often the belief is that they have to emulate the worst of male characteristics of leadership in order to be successful. And like, God bless Jacinda Ardern, because I think she's an example of how to do it properly. But there's, even when we have those opportunities, the odds are still so highly stacked against success. And it makes me sad for the fact that I have 2 young women who are coming into this world. But also, you know, there was a beautiful campaign, and I don't know if you saw it, that was done in the UK. And it was just a text campaign, and there were huge subway posters. And it says, close your eyes and imagine a CEO. Is it a man? Close your eyes and imagine a nurse. Is it a woman? Close your eyes and imagine someone crying in the office. Is it a woman? Close your eyes and imagine someone who has to leave early from the office to pick up their kids. Is it a woman? Like, the problem is so much larger than just the job opportunities.
Yeah.
It is systemically ingrained in who we are as a society. The nurturing mom, if a kid is sick, 9 times out of 10, it's mom who leaves work to go home and take care of them, right? And I remember when we started at UWC Thailand, and if you know me well, okay, I have a vomit phobia. I don't do puke. I will do all of the other illness. It's why you'll never see me drunk. Like, I don't do puke. And so the girls get sick. If there's puke involved, it's Jason time. Like, daddy's coming to the rescue with buckets and whatever. And I remember the first time we were at UWC Thailand and the girls got something tummy related. And so Jason stayed home. And one of the other teachers came in the next day, who was a dad, a really hands-on dad. And he said, that might be the most reassuring thing I've seen in education, that the head of school went home to take care of his sick kids. And I was at work. So, and like, that shouldn't be something that's so exceptional, right? It should just be like, what's your workload? What's my workload? Okay, you go. Or in our case, there's puke. It's your turn. But, you know, like, I get disheartened, like Andrea is, when I think about, where do you start? And we start doing what Andrea is doing, which is raising young men to see women as capable and equal. And we keep hoping that as generations go through this process, it will reduce and reduce and reduce and reduce. But like you said, we've just seen it all go backwards. Yeah. And then there are dramatic repercussions for men. Like, a lot of the teachers who were at home in the pandemic trying to teach are also mothers who have their own kids at home who are supposed to be supported with online learning. So now it's affecting the quality of the education that young men and young women are getting. Yeah. So it's a...
And then you saw the, you know, single families, or just low income families in wealthy countries. They didn't have access to technology. You know, like in developing countries, like, a lot of the children didn't have access, not even to technology. They didn't even have Wi-Fi in their home, even if they did have access. And, you know, it just, I felt like the whole system just collapsed around women childcare.
It did.
You know, like the domestic violence thing that sort of came up, and I put it in that blog that I wrote this week. I mean, the first page of a pandemic book is, before you go into complete lockdown, make sure that you remove anyone who's been convicted of domestic violence from the home. Go and put them in a hotel. They can do whatever the hell they want, but get them out of the home so that the women are safe. Basic thing, right? Nothing like childcare facilities, you know. And now there's a massive shortage. There's these parts of the developed world where there's no childcare facilities. So it sort of takes away so many choices. And you know, I think if we could redesign the business world and the world with women at the center of the design, but you need 50% of women's voices at the table to do that. Yeah.
And this is what sends it all backwards, right? And when you look at, if you have kids at home and someone needs to stay home with them, you choose the lower income earner to stay home with them. And 99.9% of the time, that's mom.
Yeah.
Look, I've got something to say about this, about domestic violence, and it's very much projected on a men towards a lady thing. It's hardly ever projected on towards a lady towards a men thing. So I'll give you an example. A man doesn't like whatever the lady is cooking for dinner, so he doesn't necessarily slap her about, but he's violent in his actions and his expression, all that type of stuff. A lady doesn't like what the man's contributing to their lifestyle, and she gets violent. There's the flip side of the coin happens, and I have to admit,
but it happens like.
Can I?
No. The fraction of it doesn't implement it. The fact that it happens. I've been in relationships like this. This is what happens. I'm talking out of experience. So it has to be something that has to be considered.
Absolutely, there is no question that domestic violence goes both ways. But until we hear that one husband a week is being killed by their domestic partner, I don't think it's an issue that we have to address as much as we have to address violence towards women in the home. Sorry. I don't think it's...
No, it's a fair point. No, it's a fair point. I take your point as it is, Andrea, absolutely. No, I take your point as it is, but what I'm saying is it's something that doesn't have to be discounted. It's something that has to be acknowledged.
Certainly. Absolutely. No, and it goes both ways, but, there's a different outcome on the other side. So we're kind of running out of... We should probably be wrapping up soon. Joe, did you want to just jump in?
No, I was talking about the idea.
On this one.
I was because I'm always balancing this against this thing about the natural hierarchies and hierarchies of competence, which is always a problem because as once you bring up competence and say who then is the one who says you're competent. I was just thinking about how the situation with kids, for instance, right? If my kids were ill, and if they had anything to say with it, they wouldn't have me come back and look after them. I mean, they first of all would come back home and find, oh, there's a kid missing. Oh dear. I'm really not the better nurturer. I'm a really good strategist, but if you wanna come home and just not say anything and be around a table and not say anything together for a while, and then I'll make a comment about something that you want to go off to a room and not talk about it. I'm the guy who can do that. But if kids were to choose, I think they usually choose the parent that's more fun, the one that they want to have around. And I know some dads qualify that way. I don't think I'm one of those.
Yeah. Oh, look, not everyone was born to.
Oh, don't agree so soon.
No, I mean, it's a completely different. Completely different situation in my home. I mean, Steve's an amazing nurturer. He's completely devoted to the boys. He's always there. He's always present. And, they'll come to me as much as they'll go to him. And, that's what we've always wanted, but it's not always the same. And sometimes that's a conditioning thing too, right? How were you raised? Was your dad involved? I think that's important too. So, and my boys will certainly be involved in their children's future if they are able to have children because of the way that their dad was involved in theirs. So I think, we can change it through the generations too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's absolutely, man. No, change is inevitable. Change, that's the only thing that's certain is change.
To get us to a better place, definitely. I think that's definitely something that everyone wants to do. But I think the same way, I think kids can be quite cruel sometimes, and they can resent the idea that the dad is doing the things because it's a have to thing. It's one of those things as well.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Clinton just commented that kids obviously often prefer the mum, but again, I think it's the way the mum is when the children
exposure.
come.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So
From exposure. Exactly.
Yeah. There was one thing that Steve couldn't do when the boys were born, and that was breastfeed. And otherwise, he could do everything. And from the word go, it was like we're in it together, And
there are a lot of homes with two dads.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but and sometimes the mum wants to do that, and that's great. And sometimes the dad wants to do it, and it's great. But I think, regardless, like when our children grow up and become adults, they're going into a place that is designed with one sex in mind and one way of being in mind. And I think men suffer that as much as women. I think men lack choices in how they can live their life. So many of the guys I speak to wish they could do things in different ways, but they felt this burden from the day they were born that they're going to be the provider. So men have got this stuff going in their heads just as much as women have got their stuff going in their heads. And I just think, you know, men, be an ally to women. Don't think this is an opposition. Don't think that this means you're going to lose something. I always say everyone wins with equality. We need to stand side by side and face the future together, equal voices at the table. But for women, I've got to tell you, ladies, we've got to step up. You know, I was at an International Women's Day the other day, and there's this lady had something to say, and she didn't have the guts to get up and grab the microphone and say it. We've got to grab the microphone. We've got to apply for the jobs. You know, like 80% of applications for these events that I get involved in come from men and 20% from women. We have to step up. I don't care if it scares us. We've got to do it. You know, you guys know I'm stepping up much more than I've ever stepped up, and I'm doing it intentionally because we've got to do it. And I'm trying to be a role model for girls and women around the world. And women have got to stop asking for it, and we've got to start taking it. And that's a fight I want to fight.
You're absolutely right. You know, like you're saying, you know, the flip side of the coin is this: the expectation of women. I'm going to use extreme examples, and I'm sure I'm going to be crucified for this online. But you know, the place of a woman is barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. The place of a man is on the field, sweating his ass off and bringing in the food. You know, this is the expectation. So the same pressures, the same pressures that they have effect on your emotions and your well-being and your thought process, all that, it's present in the male aspect of things as well. So I can't stay at home the whole day and do home things and hang out with my family. I have to go out in the field and swing a pick or swing a hoe and gather the grains or go shoot a fucking animal. Go shoot an animal and do whatever. Sorry, I'll pay the penalty. But, you know, get on with it. So those pressures are the same. You know, it's not the same as in word for word, but the effect it has on the person is the same. It's that challenging thing. So now all of a sudden, as a man, I'm put under the pressure to make sure that the people under my care, which is my wife and my kids and possibly my parents and my in-laws and my whatever, you know, you spread the net as far or as small as you want. You know, all of a sudden, I've got that pressure on me now. So I can't do family things. I have to wake up and go do this and then come back, go to sleep, wake up and go do this in order for all this to succeed. It's not a matter of fairness, you know, but if you're going to bring the equality matter in it, it's not equal. It's absolutely not equal. In order for this franchise being a family to succeed, you've got these responsibilities, I've got these responsibilities. Together, we've got these shared responsibilities. Along with these other people, there's additional responsibilities that comes to tow. So everybody needs to put their hoe in, put their bag in, pull their fair weights, and let's go for it. You know, whether you're a man, woman, boy or girl, your sister, brother, cousin, what doesn't matter. You know, you're somebody who's willing to live your life and willing to get on with it. You know, go to the beaches, go surfing, go climbing the highest mountains, become the most successful business person in the world. You know, it's almost as if your gender or your sexuality shouldn't matter. And I'm referring specifically to the people who identify as different pronouns. You know, that's totally irrelevant. You know, as long as you're a successful person, you know, people will support you. And this is, I think, in my opinion, this is what I try to achieve. You know, it's take it from where it comes from.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I always say, you know, there's too many people yearning for something that they want in their life, but they don't have the right to go for it because their sex doesn't allow them the space, right? So I just think of all the people yearning. I'm lucky. I don't have to yearn. I could do whatever the hell I wanted, you know. And I wasn't raised like most people were raised in Australia. I had a dad at home who brought us up because he was working from home as an artist. And my mum was always out there. She was earning the bacon. So I already had opposite parenting and opposite way of thinking. And then, you know, just wondering. But like, the change is so systemic, and it's always. I was talking to someone just the other day, and they said what we should do right now is for the next 10 years, the only people who should be allowed to move into positions of heading up companies or heading up countries should be female for 10 years, right? And then at the end of 10 years, if women haven't sorted it out, and 10 years will be enough time to get it sorted out, right? But if we haven't had enough time to sort it out, we can go back to what we've got now. Why don't we do that? Take a risk.
Not going to work. It's not going to work. I mean, males have had how many years to do it?
But nothing has changed.
No.
Nothing has changed in the last 10 years, right?
No.
So we need to get radical if we're going to see the change. Do you want final statements on the International Women's Day before we wrap it up?
Yeah.
So,
I've spent so much time thinking about this, and just because I'm a female and I have 2 daughters. But I think, I love the Break the Bias campaign, but I think the thing that I would ask anyone, male, female, whatever, is for me, I think it's about the removal of doubt.
yes.
Because that is what undermines. When a CEO walks in and he's male and he's 6 foot and he's white, there is an assumption that he knows what he's doing and it's all going to be fine. There's no doubt. When that person walks in and they're a person of color, all of a sudden there's a little doubt, right? Did they get there because of affirmative action? Did they get there because somebody wanted a board picture that was more diverse? Did they? The same thing happens with women.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's this little doubt. Oh, is she the right person for the job? Like Harvard Business Review did a piece on it that somebody else shared that said, I'm tired of people waiting to talk to the man who's in charge. Because I'm actually in charge. But they're like, well, but maybe there's a board behind you and maybe the chair of the board is a male and that guy is ultimately going to have the final say. And I mean, it caused quite a stir in the commentary and what have you. And then I thought it was very interesting that there were men weighing in saying this particular woman's field wasn't like that. And I'm like, she just said it was. And so I think that you should maybe not be talking here. But it's just stop doubting. Let people prove themselves, whether they are purple, orange, female, or male. Who cares? Like, let people prove themselves and don't doubt them
and support
because
them.
of what they look like.
Yeah, but not just let them prove themselves. Yeah. Help them succeed. Because that's the thing. People actively do not help them to succeed, and that's a huge part of the problem. Huge.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right.
Break the doubt.
Maybe
it's weird. Like campaign. Yeah, it's weird like this. If you try and tackle somebody else, you fall at the same time. Why not help them out? Even a 10% of a progression is a progression. If you help somebody else out, that 10 might turn into a 50 or 80. You never know. But why break somebody down? What's the point? Yeah. What's the point?
Oh, we're good at that, aren't we? All right,
if we
so
had
we're going to wrap up.
50% more climate scientists, we might be in a better place. So.
Well, exactly. We're going to wrap up. So, what is keeping you distracted at the moment? What are you watching, reading, listening to? Anything worth? I'm looking for Netflix recommendations, by the way.
Yes, the prequel to Games of Thrones is coming out sometime this year. The prequel to Games of Thrones. Yeah, that's coming out sometime this year. Yeah. And season 4 of Formula One. You mentioned it last week. It's coming out today. And that's the other thing. And then on YouTube, I've got going on Deer Meat for Dinner and Meat Eater. Highly recommend it.
What was the first one?
Deer Meat for Dinner. One word. Okay. Deer. Yeah, no, it's a guy who lives out in Florida with his family, his wife, and his 2 kids. I mean, he's got 2 daughters that are knee-high to a grasshopper. They live on a ranch in Florida, and they catch tilapia and gators, and they clean and cook everything they catch, pigs, whatever. It's a really fun thing, even to have a family able to live in an environment like that and totally enjoy that level of freedom is totally satisfying to watch.
You're so African. And what's the other one?
Deer Meat for Dinner. A meat eater. Meat eater. Yeah, no, Stephen Ranella, he travels all over the world. He does ethical hunting. Whatever he hunts, he cooks, he cleans, he makes the food. Right. Sometimes he doesn't get anything, but he's still out in nature enjoying what nature got to offer. It's outdoorsy, it's fun.
Kids would love that.
Yeah, man. Nice. No, come on. It's all about being a man.
Okay, I don't have something that's been distracting me this way, so I'm going to use this time instead to make one final point about the previous idea, which is don't rely on meritocracy. That's one of the things that is a failure. I work with the academics all the time, and they always work I can stand on the merit of my work. And you have to earn it not just in what you've done, but also in what you portray. And that is something that people tend to not want to do, and because they want to be respected just because they're intellectual. They want to be respected for whatever they are, but they don't want to pay a certain price sometimes, which is standing straight, standing tall, speaking a bit louder, wearing slightly better clothes, whatever it is, all these things that are a price to pay for what it is that you want. And what a lot of people try to do is to get other people to buy it at a different price. They want you to they want you to just respect them just because. But so that's my little idea. Don't rely on meritocracy.
I agree with that, but I think we can flip it as well. There's obviously a lot of women who do not want what is on offer.
Well,
and that's the problem.
No,
we didn't even talk about like hatred towards women, like female politicians in America, or just hatred online. You know, why would you want to put yourself out there when there's just all this ugliness that's just going to come at you just because you're a woman? And you know, I experience it. I know what it's like. So, but that's why I keep saying we've got to change the system.
Yeah, no, it's a culture. It's a cultural thing, man. It's a cultural thing. It's not a systemic thing. It's a cultural thing. Think about tribalism, even in Thailand, in South Africa, in South America. I mean, if you think about you can even mention the European nations, the same thing. The culture has always been the men here and the women here. You know, whatever fight is going on, that's always been the culture in whichever nation you're into. One of the few areas that actually made massive progress on this is the Nordic and the Scandinavian countries, including Iceland and Greenland. I mean, they've got some of the countries with the highest elected female ministers and government representatives in the world. I mean, it was the first country one of those countries was the first one to elect a female prime minister. The first female in charge of the country was one of those countries. And these guys are succeeding socially, you know, educationally, you know, financially, whatever. They are winning. And I'm not saying it's because of the female influence. What I'm saying is because of the inclusion influence. Yeah. They're willing to listen to everybody's voices and not discount somebody else's purely based because of what they look like or what they have.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right, Sam, what are you watching, reading, listening to, being distracted by?
Inventing Anna.
Oh, yes.
That's mine.
Inventing Anna was fantastic. And then Pieces of Her. Toni Collette.
Saw that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Excellent. And I love it because it's like a mini series. So there's not 8 seasons of it. It's like 9 shows and it's done.
All right. Awesome.
And it's very, very good.
And Toni Collette's good.
Oh, she's amazing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Steve's away for nearly 3 weeks, so for the first time in 2 years, I can watch whatever the hell I want, which is it feels so amazing, right? That you've always had to factor in your partner because you've been stuck together for 2 years. It was a very enjoyable time together. But
it's recommendations that come up after you've been through that list that's going to make them go like, what?
What have you been watching?
So if you want to learn about your kids, then the young women who your sons may be dating one day, there's Bold Type and Euphoria.
How good is that? Have you seen the last one?
No, I actually gives me heart palpitations because it makes me want to send my kids to a convent somewhere.
That'll make it worse.
But I will.
By the way, the convent episode's coming up next week.
All right, guys, we are going to say goodbye. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much to Denys for joining us, and it's been great. And I knew you'd just be jumping in and taking us in all different directions, which is awesome. And you've got great knowledge, history as well, which I love. And Sam, thank you so much for joining us in the host seat this week, and you'll be back next week. And Joe, good to see you, darling.
Lovely to be with you as well, Andrea. And of course, thank you out there on the other side of this exchange. Don't just leave it in your feed. Share it. Tell someone else about it. And if you want to be more specific about which part to look out for, go ahead and write a post about that. Andrea likes to give you advice in that kind of area.
Joe, I love your shirt. Next time I'll have the same one on. It's in my closet.
My wife bought it for me. So I thought I'd wear it. Yeah.
It's my Christmas shirt from last year.
Chili peppers.
Flamingos.
All right,
Well,
I'm going to end the live discussion, guys. But yeah, see you next time. All right.